Ken Jordan here. Today I want to do something a little bit different. I'm going to focus on a single SCP and hopefully discuss the heck out of this one particular item. It's a good jumping off It's a good jumping off point for things that I want to get to. Let me see here. First of all, I'm going to read the description. It's really tempting for me to start giving my own opinion first, but I think that this is a really well-written SCP, and I hope everybody will go to the SCP Foundation website, read it for themselves, look at some of the other things, pay attention to these various types of material. It's not just this. Horror movies, science fiction movies, creepypastas, anything that will push your mind a little bit further. Some of the UFO things online would be good for this. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here. A lot of those UFO things, they might as well be SCPs. We're talking that they are fictions. They are things that people are making up. Mixed inside of that is real information, however, sometimes from the same people. Sometimes people who clearly are con artists have nailed certain aspects of things. Sometimes people who are clearly delusional are clearly also having real life situations go on that are influencing them. Right? It's just that part of the confusion around these things that really gets to people. And, hey, far be it from me to tell you that I'm the font of all knowledge here or anything like that. Again, half of everything that I know or think I know is wrong. Keep that one in mind, not just in regards to me, but to your own life. And you're going to be ahead of the game. Okay, SCP-434. SCP-434 is an antique conference table. The SCP will not function unless at least 8 chairs are placed around it. When a subject sits at the table, physical duplicates of the subject appear in 7 of the other chairs. These individuals, referred to as SCP-434-1 to 434-7, possess all of the subject's memories and knowledge, but seemingly only a fragment of their personality. The SCPs are aware of their temporary nature and rarely react negatively to it. When questioned on the issue, they will state that they are elements of the subject and will live in him, or I presume her, for all of their life. The individuals remain for a full day after the subject leaves the table, after which they vanish. Lost my place here, sorry there. Leaving no detectable traces. However, the individuals are more than capable of assaulting each other, other personnel, and in rare cases, typically where the subject is mentally unstable, the subjects themselves. While injuries have no lasting effects, the death of an individual results in a marked change to their personality, in the personality of the subject, corresponding to the lack of the aspect embodied by that individual, the portion of themselves that perished. Number 1, will not tolerate criticism and will not accept the subject has ever been at fault for anything. The subject will always ignore evidence to the contrary. Conversation will focus on positive aspects of the subject. The loss of number 1 results in a crippling loss of self-confidence and self-esteem. Number 2 will act and advise the subject for their own benefit, regardless of the requirements or well-being of others. The loss of number 2 will cause the subject to consistently fail to consider their own needs in decision-making, to a point that it's often eventually fatal. Number 3 rarely speaks, and does so only to counsel the avoidance of activities or effort on the subject's behalf. The loss of number 3 results in the subject apparently losing the ability to sleep without chemical assistance, and a deep-seated reluctance to take rest of any kind. Number 4 will often fixate on a specific object or quality possessed by an individual known to the subject and advise its acquisition. Number 4 will also react negatively to all individuals who are not the subject. The loss of number 4 results in the subject losing their capacity to identify objects as theirs, and over an extended period gradually erodes their sense of self. Number 5 will advise the subject to explore their whims and desires regardless of practicality or the presence of other requirement. The loss of number 5 results in the subject no longer being able to experience enjoyment in any form of activity, with the expected associated physiological damage. Number 6 will advise aggression, active or passive, to counter all difficulties suffered by the subject. Number 6 is the most likely to become violent. The loss of number 6 results in the subject becoming almost entirely passive and avoiding conflict of any kind. Subjects lacking number 6 will not engage in violence of any kind regardless of the situation. Number 7 will advise the subject as to what the subject believes is their best long-term gain, regardless of the needs of others. The loss of number 7 will result in a crippling degradation of the subject's long-term planning and decision-making capabilities. The SCP was first brought to the attention of the Foundation by members of a secret order, an organization that has had an extensive history of contact with SCPs. This subject was reported to be stored in a vault in the Vatican. However, when a Foundation recovery team was dispatched, the vault was found empty. Forensic analysis of the vault indicates recent weapons fire and blood traces. In 19, number redacted, the Foundation was made aware of a break-in at blank house. An MCD holding examination of police reports allowed the Foundation to locate the subject before it was recovered by MCD. Carbon dating of the wood from the subject indicates that it is approximately 3,000 years old. The theory currently held by the Foundation researchers is that SCP-434 was built from material salvaged from a much older SCP. The subject has proven a useful tool in both personal evaluation and non-standard interrogation. Its use to alter the behaviors of troublesome subjects is pending approval. Now, why would I think that SCP-434 is important for discussion? This specific SCP is called A Meeting with Myself, and that's the actual point here. That's the part of this that becomes incredibly fascinating. Not that sitting down at the table and seeing 7 of yourself with different portions of your personality talking to you wouldn't be interesting or perhaps useful. But in real life, the idea of meeting with yourself and gaining understanding of yourself is at the heart of many of our religious and spiritual practices. There are a bunch of ways of doing this. The idea behind it basically being that the more you know about yourself, the more you come to both accept and be able to manage various portions of your personality, the more powerful you become in the world. Better able you will be to handle what's going on around you. So, with that in mind, looking toward a more solid integration of the self, of the different portions of the self, becomes kind of a goal of anybody who wants to survive the strange things that are coming. The better you know yourself, the less likely you're going to be led astray by the things going on around you. That said, there are a few key points to get into before we actually cover, similar things to this SCP. This is actually so common in a way, and I'll admit, not as cool of a way. Again, sitting down at the table and actually seeing physical copies of yourself discussing things with you would be a powerful mechanism for getting some things done, self-work. There are other ways, though, and they work pretty well, even if they're not as interesting and awesome as this SCP would actually be in real life. Just to put this out, I've seen cloning, I've seen really good computer simulations used in a similar fashion to this for people, where they have been given information from their own minds about themselves. I've not seen this one exactly in any way, shape, or form. Nothing to the level of actually making copies of people that were physical objects. Copies that are mental objects, yes. That, the idea of something that you believe to be real, that you're seeing, that you interact with as a portion of reality, who could indeed be you, or far more commonly, someone else, that is consistent and a part of the human experience. Anyway, What I want to get to right now is a few primary factors that a lot of people have problems with that really create most of the difficulties that people have integrating into being a singular person that they can both accept and manage. The first portion of this is that human beings are all animals. Specifically, we're mammals. A lot of people, and I view this as the biggest flaw of religion, view us as being special and above the animalistic qualities of the world. This is simply not true. Looking at human beings, we are equally and easily as led by our emotions and raw biological components as any other animal on the planet. Denying this means that you're not going to be looking at it, and you're not going to understand why you do certain things. That brings us to the second portion of things. We have an illusion of free will. Well, free will itself would require our conscious minds to be in control of what's actually going on inside of ourselves and how we react all the time. It is thought that at least part of the time we do have the ability to influence our subconscious behaviors. We can, for instance, decide to go on a diet and work backwards to our subconscious mind, which may try to sabotage us or may allow us to go on that diet and stay with that diet, understanding what our conscious mind is going for. Most of the time, though, and this is 90+% of our day, we actually start to form the ideas of what we're going to do on a subconscious level. We'll perform those ideas outwardly in the world. Say, getting up to go get a cup of coffee, and then retroactively recall the idea or make up the idea that we wanted to go get a cup of coffee, and it was our will and choice to go and do this on a conscious level. Now, you can say, well, it's still free will because it's what's going on inside your own head, and if you want to go to the semantics on that one, okay, I'll go with that. I don't think that we are inherently so linked to other people on the subconscious level that we don't have any ability to act independently. But thinking that we have pure free will is a limiting factor. Just look at the science on that one and understand that we really don't. So you're an animal, and you're an animal that doesn't necessarily have a choice in what you're doing all the time. And lastly, because we always need to have at least three things, there's a physical, biological component to how these other two things interact with our conscious minds. For instance, if you're hungry, you're going to be more hostile towards the world around you. This doesn't mean that if you're full, you're suddenly going to be a sweet and kind person, but you're going to have to work harder to be a sweet and kind person who is kinder to those around you if you're physically hungry. The same is true if you're tired, if you're run down. Basically anything that causes your blood sugar to be at a low ebb will put your brain at a low ebb, and you'll tend to respond to everything around you in a slightly more hostile or suspicious fashion. Conversely, if you're too warm, you're going to think of things in a specific fashion. If you're too cold, you'll often consider things in a different light. If you're holding a heavy weight, and this one will probably sound weird to you, but if you're just, say you pick up a 100-pound weight and you're holding it while trying to make a decision, you will view that decision as being far heavier, and therefore more important to you. The point here is not the specific effects of these things, though they're interesting to learn of, and things, again, that have been tested. You can go look up studies on these things. This isn't just some secret project that you're not allowed to know about. These are part of modern psychology. But what this means is that we're often influenced by the world around us and by our own biology's response to the world around us in very specific fashions that can be very telling and controlling of how we make up our mind and make decisions on a subconscious level. So in a way, we're part of the reality around us without conscious awareness of that. Alright, now, those are all nifty factors, but what we're talking about here is a meeting with ourselves, a meeting with that deeper part of us that we normally kind of ignore. There are several ways of doing this, and some of them are really common. Some of them are really easy. For instance, if you simply daydream about talking to yourself or this deeper portion of yourself, get yourself into a relaxed state, think about the subject matter at hand, and generate an imagined version of yourself, and simply allow them to tell you what they think, you're going to more or less be able to have this meeting with yourself and find out what your deeper self, the deeper version of you, is working off of. Now, this actually increases your ability to make a different decision rather than decreasing it. The more conversation, the more connection you have to your deep unconscious mind, the better able you're going to be to alter things on a conscious level and be understood on that subconscious level. Let's say you imagine talking to yourself about a new diet. The subconscious version of you says, well, I do like tasty food, and I do like being full and not hungry. And then you can explain, well, yes, those are good things, but with a potentially dangerous situation coming into the world in a few months, days, years, what have you, being thin and in shape and able to move will be more important than having a piece of cake now. And you may be able to show your deeper self that survival trumps the biological desire to get all the goodies now. Maybe not. It depends on how ingrained that portion of you is, and this is not a very powerful way of reaching that portion of yourself, but it is a way. You can also interact with your deeper mind through dreams, which is the primary way that your subconscious mind gets to interact with your conscious mind, that's powerful enough to actually shake you a little bit and say, hey, here's a situation that we need to work on. Very often, if you recall a dream, it is because what's going on in that dream state is something that your subconscious mind wants your conscious mind to recall. It also helps if you sleep a lot. If you sleep more than 8 hours, you're far more likely to remember your dreams. And in the early hours of the morning, after 8 to 10 hours of sleep, you'll have much longer dreams, which makes them much easier to remember. But that being said, very often, we find dreams a little troubling because there are issues involved that are not given to us exactly, but rather are hinted at. For instance, you may be left all alone in your dream, the world being an empty place. This is your subconscious mind, most probably, telling you, hey, you're actually kind of lonely. You might want to deal with this. I feel like we're alone all the time. Maybe you could work out how to get a little bit more attention, a little bit more interaction with other people, that kind of thing. Also, we have meditation, which can allow just a very direct integration of the subconscious and conscious mind. Master meditators very often have only the thinnest layers between those portions of themselves, and in some cases, those portions more or less disintegrate. Now that's very, very high-level meditation. We're talking people who spend 20 or 30 years in a darkened cave, mastering their own mind and the interaction between their conscious and subconscious selves. But it can happen. Yes, people that do that very often show anomalous abilities and functionally superpowers. They also become very incomprehensible to people who are a little more standard because they can't understand how things are functioning that way. They can even see them happening and will often lose track of it. It's the debunker syndrome. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of the debunking material that you've ever heard of has been put out by, well, people like me. We've actually put this stuff out there to get you to not pay too much attention to certain information. We thought we had a good reason at the time. Turns out, not so much. But there are people who will gravitate towards that thought, who will ignore large bodies of evidence in order to hold to what they believe is reality, which is the standard reality that we're all taught without anything else going on. Well, quite clearly, if you're paying attention, there's a lot of other stuff going on. It shows up in scientific testing, it shows up all over the internet, and you'll have people who will sit there and deny the reality of it over and over again, very often in a very logical fashion. Remember, just because you can't tell what is going on, or in this case, the debunkers can't tell what's actually going on, they can't accept that information, and they will indeed literally forget when they are shown proof or evidence of things. It's very common if you ever deal with a person who's a natural debunker. They will sit there, one day you can lead them through 10,000 studies showing that psychic phenomenon works, and the next day they will insist that you didn't show them anything. They will insist they never had the conversation. I've had this happen several times, not that often, but several times in my life, where it's just left me baffled staring at the person who quite clearly believes that they just never discussed what you clearly did, and when you show them proof that they had the discussion, they'll just say you're lying. This is almost a universal thing, but they can still be very intelligent people. And much like those who believe in the flat earth, if you listen to the more persuasive of their arguments, they're well presented and well put together and seem very reasonable because they leave out the other portions of the information which would disprove their theory. If you feel secure that the world is indeed a sphere, you should go onto YouTube and look up some of that flat Earth material. Look around a little bit, find some of the longer documentaries which seem a little bit more polished, and you'll find that by the end of it, even though you know it's not true, you know it's bullshit, you can show the people the pictures from space and whatnot. You'll be nodding along with the thought of, well, this seems pretty reasonable when it's put that way. And it's because they're closing out a portion of the arguments. A similar thing is happening with global warming. The denial side of global warming is the debunker side. And oddly enough, the flat earthers are a debunker mindset quality. The vast majority of people who would try and debunk things would say, well, that flat earth is the strange theory. But the reason the flat earthers believe it is because they have encountered information in a way which causes them to think that the other theory, let's call it the rounder theory, is the strange one that doesn't fit their worldview. It largely has to do with the same idea that what these people see in the world around them. For instance, if you live on the Great Plains, you go outside and you see a flat earth with what looks like a dome over it, then you have a tendency to think, well, this is the proof that I actually need. If it's cold where you are right now, then global warming can't be happening. That is one of those biological effects we talked about earlier, by the way. Indeed, if you were to walk into a walk-in freezer, spend 5 minutes in it, and then had to work on a checklist describing whether or not global warming was happening, far fewer people would say, yes, global warming is a fact, because they're physically cold at the moment. This is the kind of thing that I was talking about at that point. Again, that was an actual study that was done, and it works the other way around, too. More people believe it if you put them in a hot room. It's like, well, it has nothing to do with either of those factors, but that is something to keep in mind and know about yourself, that you're going to be influenced by things like that. Okay, where was I here? I think we were talking, I got off on a tangent, because this is what I do, and hopefully there was something useful in that tangent, because that is kind of the point of what I'm going on here with. A meeting with ourselves, let's say, integration due to meditation. You also have hallucinogens, things like ayahuasca, for instance, DMT. Very often, what appears to really be going on, particularly with ayahuasca, is a deep examination of the self over time. Now, you don't normally meet yourself. You may meet other people, The ayahuasca mother is a common thing that you see, which people believe to be the embodiment of the vine itself. In DMT, smoked, inhaled DMT experiences, people talk about the clockwork elves, the mechanical seeming almost alien beings. Now, again, I'm right now going on the argument that, these may be portions of yourself that you're learning things from. There are also some indications, particularly with the clockwork elves there, that what we're actually doing is dealing with the reality around us, and you just happen to often be in a room with clockwork elves, and you probably are right now if that's the case. You just can't see them. This may or may not be true, or both may be true at the same time. But right now we're focusing on integration of self, which with ayahuasca seems to be a very big thing. Normally, what happens is that people process the problems that they have in life. They can see them, and they will find a convincing element within themselves to make a change. Once that happens, well, many people describe their lives as getting better. Now, there are also heavy biological components to uses of hallucinogens. I am not even recommending that particularly right now. If you're a person who has that kind of a bent in life, do it legally. Or if that is something that we all need to keep an eye on right now. Anybody stepping out of the bounds of convention, mentally, psychically, needs to be within the letter and spirit of the law, because there may well be harsh crackdowns on things as the world starts to heat up a little bit here in the next months and years. It may even be kind of important to certain individuals to crack down on people. So, if you're going to do ayahuasca, go to a place where it's legal. South and Central America has many, I won't say fine, but many institutions which will allow you to partake of that kind of thing. Also recall that ayahuasca journeys are not a pleasurable thing in the main, often involving severe emetic and diuretic effects. So, you want to keep that in mind. You're not going to be comfortable doing those things. Now, on the other side of this, well, you don't have a table to sit down at and have things thrust upon you that assuredly. You generally know the parts of yourself that you want to work on. That's generally something that most people deal with. We don't enjoy the fact, say, that we get angry over certain things, or we don't enjoy the fact that we don't seem to have control over how much food we eat, or how little exercise we manage to get. These are all changes that you can simply decide to make in yourself and hold to. It's not necessarily the easy way of doing it, but you can work on these integrative qualities, even, say, being a little bit more aggressive, by simply deciding that you have a problem there and working out a strategy to make an improvement in your life. Now, I just covered some of the most boring ways of dealing with these things because we don't have magical tables like SCP-434 in order to help us out and do the work for us. But stop being lazy. You really want to hit these things fast and hard. You want to get on top of this kind of integration. Start working on it today, tomorrow at the latest if you can. And on the next one, I will get to more interesting things. I've got a lot of stuff that I really want to present. I kind of think that this worked pretty well, but it might be just a little bit too boring for some people. I will try and make most of these things far more interesting. But this is important. Just because it's boring doesn't mean that you shouldn't be working on this stuff. I promise on the next one, I will do things in a far more interesting fashion, if at all possible. Okay, thanks everybody. Talk to you soon.